about the BBC, because back on the 30th of June, we were talking about this reporter, Frankie McCamley, who was basically misleading the audience over the big protest in London. This was the start of it. It didn't matter your cause. All groups mixed and charted alongside each other. Well, actually, they didn't. There was one big and distinct demonstration, but she said thousands came to Regent Street, bringing placards, flags, and familiar chants. So we don't talk about hundreds of thousands, possibly 1 million people. You just mix it into a blob. It went on, so we didn't report anything on lockdown and vaccine adverse reaction, that part of the protest. But what she did report big was Extinction Rebellion, and that's obviously a smear. And of course, Extinction Rebellion led to talk about raids, police confiscation of bamboo structures, and members arrested. So the peaceful lockdown protesters and those protesting about vaccine adverse reactions, they were ignored. Meanwhile, Extinction Rebellion was puffed up. So we did a summary, saying there was no credible reporting of the concerns of 500,000, maybe it was 1 million, families warning of the loss of liberty in lockdown and the dangers of vaccine adverse reactions. BBC didn't report that. Failure to show any images of the vaccine adverse reaction banners and leaflets. Interesting, that's just popped up, Mike, in what you've just shown us. Could the BBC be getting a little bit windy? I think they are. And then basically those peaceful families were all smeared by the BBC with the violent extremism of Extinction Rebellion. Now, we receive a lot of interesting emails. I've had to do a lot of editing of this one in order to protect the person. But they're describing a small protest that started at the BBC and was comprised of Extinction Rebellion, the Communist Party, Free Palestine, and a few other groups. There were about 2,000 to 3,000 protesters that marched from the BBC to Parliament Square. They were very separate from the Freedom anti-lockdown protest. The pictures that appeared on the BBC were taken at this protest. You can see the BBC in the background, and the reporter would have known this. It's a clear and deliberate misrepresentation of the truth. This confirms exactly what she was saying on the UK Column News, and that was the report that I've just shown our viewers today. The Freedom protest arrived at Parliament Square at about 20 to 30 minutes after the smaller protests and swallowed it up. Now, this is an email from a professional who was present. I can't give you more details, but interesting that that professional says that our report was spot on. So let's just remind people that, of course, if we go back in May, people were actually protesting outside the BBC itself, and the £5 billion BBC propaganda machine stayed silent. Let's have a look at this little clip, and we're going to thank Mick Clark for this one. But here is the real protest with people shouting out the BBC for its utter propaganda and false reporting over so many subjects. So there we have it. When it comes down to it, people will get in front of the BBC in their faces calling them out, but of course the BBC's response was silent. I'll just bring up this tweet that was sent to us because I liked it so much. Bob's Monkey said the BBC is like the PCR test. They take a false truth and amplify it over 45 cycles to the point no one questions it. So that's pretty good. And I'll also bring up this one. Now, quite often we get people saying, why do we not report things? And we often go back and say, because we haven't got the information. So somebody's saying there's a great group of people reporting outside BBC Manchester. They've been there for some time. We've been alerted to this before, but we're saying, please send us information and then we can report. So it's up to our viewers and listeners to help us out on that one.
Okay, David, back to Scotland, and this is the Telegraph with an exclusive: children being given vaccine as councils go rogue.
Yes, this is actually England.
Oh, is it? Oh,
It's
sorry.
not, yeah, this is England. So 16, 17-year-olds who are not eligible for the COVID vaccine, unless they're classified as vulnerable, have been roped into a mass vaccination programme in the English Midlands. So this is Rochdale Borough Council invited anyone aged 16 and over to have a first dose of the Pfizer jab without the need for an appointment. Another drive-through clinic for teenagers is due to take place in the town on Saturday. The spokesman said, "Our borough is one of the areas of the country worst affected by coronavirus, and our infection rate is now approaching that seen in Bolton a few weeks ago. Amongst our younger age group, the rate is almost 1,000 cases per 100,000 people. Many 16 and 17-year-olds with underlying health conditions have already been vaccinated, but many other younger adults who are at risk for different reasons are falling outside the national protocol." I actually have no idea what different reasons means in this context. It continues, "On that basis, and to avoid any vaccine wastage," does this mean it's because they've got vaccines that are about to be out of date?
Yeah.
Is that why we're doing this? "To avoid any vaccine wastage, a multi-agency decision," it's always a multi-agency decision, there's no one responsible, "a multi-agency decision was taken with clinical leads to temporarily expand the qualifying criteria for at-risk 16 and 17-year-olds for our clinics this weekend. But following discussions, we have now revised our plans." So they seem to have backed down. Under current COVID regulations, 16, 17-year-olds are not eligible under current guidance, for COVID vaccine, and 16, 17-year-olds are not eligible for COVID vaccine unless they're classified as vulnerable. Yet in a leaflet seen by the Telegraph, Rochdale Borough Council invited thousands of under 18s to come forward for the first Pfizer jab. It said, quote, "If you are aged 16 or over and have not got an existing appointment, please drop in to one of the extra vaccine clinics," end quote. A decision on whether COVID vaccines should be offered to youngsters is due in the coming weeks, although the Joint Council on Vaccine and Immunisation is understood to want more time to study data from the US on possible side effects. Do you think Maddie will be one of the possible side effects that they'll be studying?
Well, possibly, but so is this council breaking the law?
Well, they're certainly breaking the guidance. Who knows what the law is anymore, Mike? It's become completely unknowable. They're breaking guidance, and guidance is now the equivalent of law for these people. So, yes, and if they harm any of these 16, 17-year-olds, then I would have thought that they would have been perhaps under, shall we say, very great legal stress because they have done so not following the government guidelines and in advance of the consideration as to whether the vaccine is safe for that cohort.
Yes. Okay, look, we're going to jump forward a little bit, David, to Dr. Sam White.
Yes, thanks to a lot of people who sent this through. This is a whistleblowing GP, and there's a letter from his legal firm to Sir Sam Stevens, Chief Executive Officer of NHS England. I've got a few short extracts here. The letter's on the web, it's 22 pages long and is magnificent and is well worth a read. So the lawyer writes, "I'm instructed by Dr. Sam White, a GP. He's had his licence to practice with the NHS suspended by a letter from the NHS dated 26th of June 2021. Please treat this letter as a public interest disclosure or whistleblower in that it raises allegations of alleged criminal conduct and breach of legal obligations by those leading the COVID response." A couple of extracts of how this is how they make the case here. "My client's social media output sets out two main propositions, which are further developed here. One, the vaccine programme has been rolled out in breach of legal requirements for clinicians to obtain free and informed consent of those being vaccinated. Two, the requirement to wear face coverings in an NHS setting is in breach of common law obligations not to cause harm and breaches statutory obligations in relation to the provision of PPE." So they then go on and list the people who have failed to meet their legal requirements. Her Majesty's Government, the Executive Board of the NHS, SAGE, senior public office holders within the civil service, and the Executive Board of the MHRA. They then describe the requirements on clinicians, that they must first do no harm and then obtain the free informed consent of those being vaccinated. And they then refer to the Montgomery case, which went to the Supreme Court and laid down the principles for free informed consent, which are: 1, the patient is given sufficient information to allow individuals to make choices that will affect their health as well as being and well-being on proper information. Sufficient information means informing the patient of the availability of other treatments. The patient is informed of the material risks of taking the vaccine and the material risks of declining the vaccine. And they then go and list some of the known side effects. I'm first pointing out that the swine flu vaccine was suspended on safety grounds after 50 deaths. Remember, we're over 1,400 now. And it lists the risks from vaccination known to date as death. At the time of writing, it was over 1,300. Bell's palsy, thromboembolic events with low platelets, capillary leak syndrome, menstrual disorder and extreme bleeding, myocarditis, pericarditis, and antibody-dependent enhancement. That's just a very quick run through. This letter is all based on factual references, which are given. There's a lot of cross-references. There are much more detailed scientific papers that back up each point, but the letter is written in a way which is accessible to the public and is expressly written in that way as an intentional measure, because this is whistleblowing in an area where the public have a right to know what's happening. It's an excellent letter, and I would encourage everyone to seek it out. And there will be much information in there that people who wish to ask questions can use themselves to put pressure on those who are making these decisions to justify the decisions they're making in our name.
Yes. And then just let's quickly move on to the MHRA. Back in May, we highlighted this tweet from Lord Bethell. The MHRA has done a fantastic job in the pandemic. The Yellow Card scheme is exemplary patient engagement. He said, we're building on success by doubling down on this approach to public involvement. Please send in your thoughts. And they ran a bit of a consultation, and they came up with their patient involvement strategy. So they were going to be focused around patient and public involvement, responsiveness, and they were going to change their internal culture, and the internal culture was going to change so that it involved the public, or engagement with the public. They were going to measure outcomes, all about engagement with the public, and they were going to have partnerships with the public. So everybody would be glad to know that they have published their delivery plan 2021 to 2023 for Delivery Read Business, and it's entitled Putting Patients First, a New Era for Agency. So let's see what they have to say here. At the core of the plan is how the MHRA will draw together its scientific and regulatory expertise to help facilitate the UK life sciences sector and health service. That, in that first sentence, is all you need to know. This is not about engagement with the public. This is not about helping the public or regulating the industry. This is about facilitating the industry, developing the industry. So they're going to develop new regulatory frameworks, quickly realize the benefits of new therapies and innovative technologies such as artificial intelligence. Well, if the Yellow Card scheme is the best that they can do with their artificial intelligence, then they've got problems. But anyway, they go on to improve outcomes for patients and ensure the continued safety, quality, and efficacy of medicines and medical devices. Yes.
I mean, he's smiling as you're talking.
I know, I can see it. Underpinning this delivery is the creation of a new business model. This is a business plan that provides a financially sustainable future and will meet the increasing expectations of patients, healthcare professionals, partners, the pharmaceutical industry, government, and wider industry and non-profit stakeholders alike. So this is all about stakeholder capitalism once again. The plan sets out 14 objectives grouped into 6 central themes: scientific innovation, healthcare access, patient safety, dynamic organization, collaborative partnerships, and financial sustainability. They've got to have a decent business model going. Overarching all of these for every member of staff is the priority to deliver better patient and public involvement and putting patients first. because if you can deliver better patient and public involvement, then you can deliver a much better framework market, shall we say, for the industry. But anyway, let's have a look at what Jane